Hello hipsters, flipsters, and figure poppin' daddies and groovy chicks. Welcome back to the Jazz Ranch. It's fall here now. It's a beautiful time of year. And it's so great to see you again. And you know, I had a request to do something with John Coltrane's My Favorite Things, which is a famous recording that he did back in the early 60s, I believe. And it was really a definitive interpretation of the modal style of playing, or playing on a vamp. And it had a spiritual aspect to it, or sort of a transcending, and had a sort of a meditative aspect to it, and so on. And so I think his belief was similar to mine, in which I give these lessons freely, and it has to do with the law of giving and receiving. And Deepak Chopra actually said this about that. He said, the spiritual law of giving and receiving is based on the fact that everything in the universe operates through dynamic exchange. Every relationship is one of give and take, because giving and receiving are different aspects of the flow of the energy in the universe. I love that quote, and I think that's what John Coltrane was doing, and that's why it had such a great influence on me, and that's why I'm here today. And here is my interpretation now of John Coltrane's My Favorite Things. You know, starting out, I mainly wanted to focus on the chords and the scales and the modes of this song because they're so important. But the other aspect of it that is important is the rhythm. And this is a jazz waltz. This is a 3/4 song. It's a 3/4 and it's a waltz. Now, a traditional waltz would be right on the beat like this: 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. This is a jazz waltz which is syncopated, so it's 1 and 2, 3, 1 and 2, 3, 1 and 2, 3, 1 and 2. Or it can be like this: 1 and 2 and 3, like 1 and 2 and like 1 and 2 and 3, 1 and 2, 3, 1 and 2 and 3, 1 and 2, 3. I'm just counting it, but it's going to sound like this: 1 and 2 and 1 and 1. So you have to be able to feel those ands, those offbeats, in order to get the right feeling for this. See, now the left hand is establishing the downbeat: 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3. And the other rhythm that you could use here is like a 1, 2, and 3, like that: 1, 2, and 3, 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 1, 2, and 3. But you see, it's falling on the down, and then it's falling on up. 1, 2, and 3, 1, 2, and 3, 1, 2, and 3, 1, 2, and 3. So those syncopations and that feeling of the jazz waltz is paramount. It's so important to this song. I'm going to be talking about what I played in terms of the scales and the chords for this song, My Favorite Things. Now, I had a request by subscribers to do this, and I guess based on the famous recording by John Coltrane and McCoy Tyner. And this is not intended to be an imitation of what they did or a transcription in any way, but more or less how it inspired me and my take on it, so to speak. So I'm going to be talking about the chords and also the scales and the modes. You know, it's funny when I do these videos because when I start out I make a lot of mistakes and then I ask myself, what am I talking about? I'm not making any sense. So when you write it and say that I was clear in what I was explaining, then that was a result of probably quite a few takes. But anyway, starting out, actually I'm just playing these. Now notice the second one has the F natural in it now, you know, so you might think that that's an E to an E, and what that is a Phrygian mode. Now, here's the thing about modes. You have to ask yourself, if it's Phrygian, that means it's the third step of a major scale. So if that note is the third step of a major scale, then the scale is C. So now I'm going to play a C scale starting on E. Notice it has the flat 2 in it. Now I have to interpret it according to an E scale, E major. So it has the flat 2, it has the flat 3, the 4, the 5, the flat 6, the flat 7. You see, that's the definition of the scale. If it's natural minor now, it's going to have an F sharp in it. Why? Because it relates back to G. G major, its relative minor is E, so you're going to have an F sharp. So now I'm using, in this structure here, I'm using both a combination of Phrygian and natural minor, because I'm going to the F sharp up here. See, it wouldn't sound as good to me if I did that. That doesn't sound so good. So like I'm going like that. Now, an alternative to this would be, and I'm using both scales, so I'm using this one, which is all white notes, but then I'm using this one that has the F sharp and the C sharp in it. So now that forms this scale. So that's Dorian. Now, what does that mean? Dorian is 2. So you're asking yourself, what scale is E the second step of? So it's D. So D would have an F sharp and a C sharp in its scale. So now I'm playing an E scale I'm playing a D scale starting on E. So I'm going to be using the F sharp and the C sharp. See how it's in the chords? So it's also going to be in the scale, which is Dorian, E Dorian. So now I can use all those notes for improvisation. That's where I'm getting this line from. if I'm doing this, I'm using the Phrygian scale. Now I know this is confusing, so I want to clarify by saying that when I'm playing in a modal way and playing modal scales, actually I'm playing a major scale, but I'm starting on a different note. And when you start on a different note of a major scale, it alters the scale, the new scale that you're playing, in such a way that we have names for it. And you know, you have Ionian. Ionian is major, Dorian is minor, Phrygian's minor, Lydian is major with a sharp 4, Mixolydian is dominant, Aeolian is minor, and Locrian is minor with a flat 5. It's like, well, that's it there. So the next thing would be now a variation on modes. Full disclosure, I just made a mistake, so I have to go back, but I'm only doing short segments now. I used to do long segments, and I'd have to repeat 20 minutes of talking and then make a mistake. But first of all, we started with the Phrygian scale. Then we had the Dorian scale, which is like a D scale. Now we're going to have an Aeolian scale, which is a G scale. So it's going to have the natural C in there. Like that, you see. So that's the other one. Now this one would be if the second step of the E minor was half diminished. See, so it has... So it's sort of a combination of the two other scales. Okay, so now improvising, if I'm using the Phrygian mode, I have that dissonance of that F natural in there. If I'm using the Dorian mode, then I have the two, and that's what I was doing. And then if I'm using the Aeolian mode, now I'm going to have the natural C, but with the F sharp in there. And most of the time I was using those two scales. In other words, the natural minor scale and the Phrygian scale. I was using those two. Now also I was using the minor pentatonic. Now the E minor pentatonic is like relating to its relative major. So a major pentatonic scale on G, built on G, which is the relative major, would be 1, 2, 3, 5, 6. So if I'm starting on E now, I have this. So that E minor pentatonic is very common, and it has, what, it skips the 2, but it goes to flat 3, 4, 5, flat 7. And the pentatonic scales have been used, you know, by Chick and Herbie and McCoy Tyner. That's the big scale. That's their big scale on all the minor chords that they're going to play. So this being in minor key, you're going to use that scale proficiently. There's one more scale that I used on the minor vamp, and that was the second mode D major pentatonic. Now that means, here's D major pentatonic, 1, 2, 3, 5, 6. So if using second mode, I'm doing this. See, second mode would be. So that's where I was getting this. That's where I'm getting that. So that's the second mode. In other words, E, second mode of D pentatonic. Probably the most unique feature of this arrangement by John Coltrane of My Favorite Things is that they play in the key of E minor, and then they end up in the key of E major. So they're playing on both the vamps of an E minor vamp and an E major vamp. So the chords for the E major now would be, of course, major 7 to F sharp. It's like going up the scale tone 7. So you have an F sharp minor 7 there with a E in the root, and then you have a G sharp minor 7, then you have an A major 7, and so on, you see. So those are the chords, and the scale would be the major scale, which is Ionian. It's the Ionian mode. Ionian just means the major scale starting on its root. Now the other scale that you could use, or I used occasionally, was the Lydian scale. Now the Lydian scale would have that sharp 4 in it, the raised fourth. So it's Lydian means 4, so we would ask ourselves, what scale is E the fourth step of? So it'd be B. 1, 2, 3, 4, right? And so B would have an A sharp in it. So now we're playing a B scale starting on E on its fourth step. We're going to be putting that sharp 4 in there. So we get that sound. So there's the two scales, the Ionian and the Lydian, for the major section of the vamp. Now for the major improv, I also had two pentatonic scales that I used, major pentatonic scales. First the E pentatonic, which is 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, this one. So you get these interesting intervals. Then I had the B pentatonic, which is this one, 1, 2, 3 in the key of B, 1, 2, 3, 5, 6. Now that picked up the fifth. Now I'm talking about relationship to E now. It picks up the 5th, 6th, the major 7th, the 9th, or the 2 and the 3. You see, so you have so those pentatonic scales give you that modern sound. You see. I guess what makes this so revolutionary in its time, this recording by John Coltrane of My Favorite Things, is that they're not playing on the chord changes, which is true of most jazz tunes prior to that, but they're playing on a minor vamp and then a major vamp. So they're playing on these, and then this. So they're playing just simple scales. They're playing on simple scales, and it allows for a great amount of freedom. They're not so confined by chord changes, so they can go inside the chord or inside the scale and then go outside of it like that, there's a lot of freedom in there. So that's a whole new way of playing. It's very different from bebop. It created a whole new movement in music. You would call the modal concept of playing. I have to say, the time I heard John Coltrane play, particularly at the Jazz Workshop in Boston, they played one set for 1 hour. They played one song. I can imagine this song going on for an hour. It's kind of sort of like a raga, but it's kind of like the same concept as Indian music, which is to put you in a trance. It's a form of meditation, and for Coltrane it was a spiritual experience. And you should have a Love Supreme in your list of recordings, and you should also have My Favorite Things. Those are probably Coltrane's two most important recordings, as well as the one with Giant Steps. But at any rate, the most important one, of course, was the year that he won every award, and that was for the Album of the Year, which was A Love Supreme. This is the cover of my book, Jazz Piano Methods and Songbook for Professional Playing. It's only available through me and my website. I have a download version and a hard copy, and it's designed to fit into a 3-ring binder, so it's very practical. This is chapter 23 in book 2. It's on basic jazz improvisation. It covers the major modes and the application of the major modes. Notice that it's in a 3-ring binder, which is very practical. It lies flat on music stand. Now you have applying major modes to 7th chords, and then you have exercises and improvisation using the major modes. So this is a good way to get knowledge and an introduction to the major modes. Thanks so much for joining me tonight for this version of John Coltrane's My Favorite Things as I Interpret It. You know, now I haven't listened to this recording in quite some time, so this has more to do with like how I conceive of it and how I remember it. But at any rate, until next time, thanks so much for joining me, and please write to me, send me a comment. I love to hear from you. I always answer all my comments. You will see that if you go to my videos. You'll see that I do answer all my comments. And until next time, I'll say in the words of my great friend Hermie Dressel, he's still there and he still hears me. Swing loose and be cool, and we'll see you next time around. Bye-bye.